Yes, beautiful people. Hello, hello. A patron asked me. A patron was probably going through the Astro Basics course that I have on my Patreon, where you can learn about how to do astrology and how I approach astrology. It is sitting there waiting for you on Patreon, so you can go and join there. But one of my patrons was going through that course and had a question for me. And so I'm going to answer it here. The question was, is Uranus a malefic? And so we can look a little more broadly than that, and look at Neptune and Pluto as well, because that's the next question that's going to come up. So let's think about that for a second. So a malefic is a traditional distinction. So it is, there are, in the sort of traditional Hellenistic approach to astrology, then there are seven planets. And so there's the sun and the moon, and those are luminaries, which are a certain kind of category. They are different from the other ones. Those are the ones that shine the light. And so they do sun and moon things, and they're sort of like associated with life itself. Then there is Mercury, which is the one that is immediately out from the sun. That's the communicator planet. It rules the helm, and it sort of, like that's the one that sort of translates the sun, which is sort of like pure thought and image, into something intelligible, like language that we can use to communicate back and forth. And then from there, so we've got those three that are kind of like special. And Mercury refuses to choose a side or to choose a team. So Mercury is neither benefic nor malefic. Mercury is neither male nor female. They're just like all of the different things, neither yang nor yin, like always gonna be the Mercury is all trans everything, right? Mercury is in between, is like in transit, in motion, right? That's what Mercury does. Somebody said that Mercury doesn't identify as either male or female. Mercury identifies as a problem. And this is a good way to think about Mercury. So that's where we've got those three, right? Then there are two other categories. There are benefics and there are malefics. So the benefics are Jupiter and Venus. So Jupiter is the greater malefic and Venus is the lesser malefic, or benefic rather. So those are the ones that meaning good, they tend to bring you things that you like. They tend to bring things that feel good or comfortable or harmonious or copacetic, complacent, togetherness, cooperative, these kinds of things. They tend toward moderation, whereas malefic planets tend to bring extremes. So moderate things tend to work well, and extremes tend to bring discomfort, challenges, obstacles, difficulties, irritation, troubles, things that you typically don't like as much. Those are the malefics. Malefics are those are like the word means evildoer, right? And so I always caution that we're not necessarily talking about evil in the moral or ethical sense of the term. We're talking about things that you don't like. We're talking about things that you do not prefer. So frequently you might prefer to chill on the couch, but it might be good for you to have some discipline, get up and do something hard, right? So if you do something difficult, then that might ultimately be the thing that is best for you. And so you would, by engaging a malefic, by engaging some discomfort, then you ultimately come to your greatest good. Or by chilling, by hanging out with a benefic, eating something and chilling and not doing something difficult. Sometimes this is lovely, or sometimes this gets you further into trouble. There is such a thing as too much of a good thing, right? So this is the way that I always think about benefic and malefic as distinctions. Those are Hellenistic categories. That's all seven planets, right? And then there comes a time in fairly recent history when we see the discovery of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And so there has been some debate as to whether or not those should go on to rule signs. I prefer traditional sign rulership, and so I don't mess with that. They are other next things. They are different things entirely. So I wouldn't consider them either malefic or benefic. Now, with that said, we can think about what benefic and malefic planets do. So benefic planets tend to bring you things that you like, things that are comfortable and helpful, supportive. Malefic planets tend to bring things that are that are uncomfortable, that are disharmonious, that are problematic in some kind of way, right? So then let's think about Uranus. So Uranus is a planet that tends to bring sudden changes. It tends to bring surprises, unexpected shifts. It tends to be associated with like breakups, breakdowns, breakthroughs, break out, break away, break free, liberation. It refuses to be repressed in some kind of way. So I often notice that major changes, especially major sudden changes, are frequently difficult for human beings. They're difficult for people. Even when changes are good for us, then we tend to cry about them. And so so we might think about Uranus as being some kind of, as like leading toward a kind of discomfort in some kind of way. And in fact, Uranus does not really abide comfort. Uranus is like changing things around. However, we can also think about how things can change for the better in some ways that are likely important. One of my favorite examples is that Frederick Douglass, who was born into slavery in Maryland in the 1820s, I think. We don't even have a birth date for Frederick Douglass, let alone a time. We don't have a proper day. But he was born into slavery and then escaped from slavery under a full moon in Pisces that was conjunct Uranus. So here we are getting into liberation, break away, break free, this kind of thing, right? So we can also notice that after he arrived in New York, so he stowed away on a ship, which I think is perfect for the full moon in Pisces conjunct Uranus, right? So he stowed away on a ship to get to freedom, and then he arrives in New York, and then when he gets there, then he's in a city full of slave catchers. And so it's a little bit like out of the frying pan and into the fire. He's almost in a worse circumstance by being there than he was when he was living on a plantation as a slave. And so there's a situation here where it is there's a sudden change and it is difficult for him. So this might make you think some like kind of malefic type of thoughts here, right? But it is freedom, and he moves himself towards self-determination, which is like his whole thing. Like the self-made man is like a talk that he goes on to give as as part of his profession for many years. I think he gave that talk for like 15 years or something like this, right? So this idea of like being in charge of one's own destiny as a free person, as a free individual, that was like a real big deal to Frederick Douglass. So, so is this benefic or malefic? It's a secret third thing, right? It's a different thing entirely. And so I don't typically think of it as a malefic. However, if I see Uranus coming to conjoin your natal moon or something like that, I don't like that. The way that I tend to be like, oh, Jupiter's coming to hang out with your moon. That looks delicious, so I don't typically think delicious when I think Uranus, although Uranus in Taurus, I am told, is responsible for the chocolate chip cookie and the potato chip. These things are delicious. So, think about that. Think about that as you will. Moving on from here, we can think about Neptune, right? And so Neptune is confusing, boundaryless, deluded, imaginative, dreamy, these kinds of things. Sometimes Neptune, when it comes to conjoin the ruler of your ascendant or your moon or something like this, there can be a feeling of lethargy, of like difficulty getting out of bed or something like that, or alternatively a super delicious kind of feeling when you are asleep. That can be hard to rouse yourself from, or this kind of thing, right? Neptune is really good for imagination and vision. It's less good for follow through. So again, we're at a point where it's like, this is not really either benefic or malefic. It's a secret third thing. It's its own category of thing. Also, one of the things about Neptune is it's moving super slowly. Like Saturn moves super slow, right? Because it takes 3 years to get through a sign, whereas the moon will get through that same sign in about 2.5 days, right? Like this is way slow. But Neptune is going to take over twice that amount of time to, it's got, I think it is 6 times that number or something like this. Like, it takes Neptune 14 years to get through a sign. So this is really, really slow. And so this is part of the reason why I don't use it to rule a house or anything, or rule a sign, which is going to go on to rule houses and this sort of thing. It's just like not a very practical thing to use. But so because we're looking at that kind of time scale, then we're looking at things that feel more geological or maybe like cultural shifting or something like this. It's like a little too big for a person. Now, with that said, if there's a Neptune transit coming to your moon or something like this, you'll probably feel that. And it's the sort of thing that, can kind of get in the way. Like, if Neptune feels good, then that might tend toward maybe addiction, or like Neptune knows how to party, right? Like Neptune, their escapism, this kind of thing, and probably not escapism in the sense of like I'm gonna get free and go to make my own self-made man history, right? Like that's probably not Neptune as much as like opium dens and this kind of thing, right? So but that's not the only thing. Like, sometimes it can be numbing. And what's the other word that I really like for Neptune? Analgesic. I really like analgesic to talk about like the kind of influence that Neptune can have. Whenever the moon is with Neptune, just like in a daily transit sort of situation, that kind of thing can go on here. So, like, it's its own thing, and it's its own thing that is distinct from Uranus as well. So I wouldn't put either of those in the same category. Now, moving on from Neptune, this takes us to Pluto. And so when we're getting out into the outer planets, I've been saying it's a secret third thing. If one of these 3 planets was going to be malefic, might be Pluto. So Pluto, a lot of times, will feel terrifying. There's there's like a sense of horrors that are associated with Pluto, things that are like sort of lurking in the shadows, that are lurking underneath. There's like a kind of a seedy underbelly to it, and like there's usually like a power kind of situation, or maybe a jealousy or obsession or something like this can go on with Pluto. And so it is Pluto on your moon or on the ruler of your rising or something like this will often feel like some kind of existential dread, and it's my teacher Austin Kopic has described it as distinct from Saturnian fear, because a lot of times Saturn will be fear of known things, like there's like, here's all the reasons why it won't work, or here's the reasons why it's a terrible idea. Or like, oh, you got to be aware of that thing over there. Don't cross this line, because if you cross this line, then terrible things will happen to you. And here are documented cases of times when it has been terrible for people who have crossed this line. That's Saturn style. Whereas Pluto style is like, I have no idea what's out there in the dark, but I can imagine all kinds of things. And many of them are like, there'll be like projections of my own most terrible fears, and I'll put those into the dark and then assume that those things are coming for me, right? And they may or may not be actually coming for me. One time I got a reading from someone who, because I had this, I'm actually still going through this right now, where Pluto is conjunct the ruler of my rising. And it's like, an astrologer said to me that there is a kind of fear or terror that isn't necessarily associated with a real thing. It might just be like existential, just like ongoing, kind of underlying forever. Like, it feels kind of gross and terrible. So it's not malefic exactly, right? But whereas Uranus and Neptune sort of like have the opportunity to bring you things that could feel good, Pluto rarely feels good. Sometimes, like there are addictive components to Pluto. And so maybe there are, if you're addicted to something, then usually there's a rush that's associated with that. So like there is a good feeling there, right? But Then the other way that I typically like to use Pluto, if there's like some kind of big Pluto situation going on, like if Pluto is conjunct the ruler of the rising in the natal chart or something like this, then I often will think about like obsession as a Pluto term and then be like, okay, maybe this could be really good for a research project or something like that. Like getting too far in, getting way deeper into some extremely niche and specific topic where you become an expert on that thing and like no one else in the world is that, then that's big Pluto energy there. So, getting to PhD level on some shit that like maybe no most folks don't really care about, like that's Pluto style. And so there can be a certain feeling of accomplishment to that, but usually it also comes with like I wasn't sleeping properly and I didn't eat food and this kind of thing. And like or like have you ever been like studying for so long that like things you start to see things in your periphery and be like what's going on out here and like so there might be some terror that is not attached to a real thing or something like this, right? This is Pluto style of thinking. So if any of these three were to be malefic or benefic, then I would probably go Pluto as malefic. But again, so Pluto, Pluto's going to spend like 20 years in a sign, this kind of thing. If Pluto comes to conjoin your thing, then it's going to spend like 3.5 years, like within a tight orb of your moon or whatever it is, right? So, this is different from like Mars is going to be here for, like we're coming into a Mars retrograde. So it's going to be kind of a long time. It'll be like 6 months of Mars in the same spot, right? Whereas, Pluto's going to be there for a real long time. So it's kind of a different game. You're looking at like different like generational forces and this kind of thing. So, so to answer the patron's question, I wouldn't necessarily consider Uranus a malefic, but it sort of depends on what you are trying to delineate in the chart. So as always, let's refer back to the question that we are reading this chart about and see what this person wants, because maybe this person wants to get free. If you're like reading a chart and somebody's in slavery and wants to get free from that shit and they've got a Uranus conjunction coming up, like maybe that could be cute, right? And that maybe that sense of freedom will feel good to them. Or if somebody is if you've got a Uranus coming to conjoin the ruler of your fourth or something like that, then like maybe you should make sure that your foundation is in order when it comes to your home or something like this, right? So like Uranus can definitely cause problems, definitely, without a doubt. Most times surprises, even nice surprises, can be considered problems. So I'm reminded of the video where there was the guy who came in like to his house and it was dark and there was a bunch of people in his house and he was strapped and he was like about to start shooting and then it was everybody wishing him a happy birthday. So like the surprises, beware of these surprises, right? Even nice surprises can like turn into some kind of thing. So I don't know. Check what your question is and get back to that, and so read in reference to that. Is it going to be comfortable or uncomfortable relative to the question at hand? That's what I got for you, and this is actually true for Saturn and Mars as well, and it's also true for Venus and Jupiter. I've seen Jupiter push people into breakups before, right? Like, and honestly, most times that's an improvement. So, follow your heart. Thank y'all for being here. If you are not on the Patreon already, then you should check out the Patreon, because there's a whole bunch of these videos, not only where I do questions and stuff, but like I do all the basics. And we're going to do a foundations course pretty soon, so keep an eye out for that. Thank y'all. Check you later.